I did not expect to find an Easter egg for the Stephen King universe in here, but I did find one. Come join me and find out. Hi, welcome back to Bookish Brummy. My name's Mel and I like to review books. So the video that we have on a Monday is normally my weekly update of all the books that I've read in the last week. And for February, I'm doing King Family February. So I've basically had a reading list of books that I was trying to read from all of the members of Stephen King family who are published authors, and then also a couple of Stephen King books from the man himself. So I'm just going to put on the screen now what the books that are not from Stephen King but from the members of his family that I'm planning on reading. Let's put that on the screen. Okay, so when I left you last week, I was in the process of reading a novella collection by Stephen King, which was called Different Seasons. And I had read Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, and I thought that that was really, really good. And I thought that the film was actually quite similar to the book, there weren't really any drastic changes. And initially, I scored that novella a 4.5, and I said that I just preferred the film over the book. There was no reason other than I think that you got to spend a bit more time with the characters in the film. But actually, I think I want to revise my rating on that. I think I'd actually bring it more up to like a 4.75. Then the second novella in that collection was called Apt Pupil, and this was like the highlight of the whole collection for me. Absolutely loved that. I thought it was brilliant. Gave it a 5 star. And then there was the next one was called The Body. That has also been adapted into a film which is called Stand By Me, which I have not yet seen, but I have ordered a copy and it has now arrived in the post, so hopefully I'll be able to watch that soon and then be able to do a comparison between the story and the film. I really loved The Body as well. I thought that was another great novella, and again I rate that a 5 star. So if you want to know more about those specific novellas, I would go back and watch last week's video because I reviewed those novellas separately and the stories. So I was left with the novella The Breathing Method. So The Breathing Method is the shortest one out of the collection. And again, it was a really, really strong story. It was really good. I'd say that this one is more of a horror, and it's probably got like a more gore effect on it. But essentially, we follow our main character, who is this lawyer at this firm, and he sort of been plodding away for years and years and years and doesn't really seem to be rising up the ranks in the way that he'd like to. And then one day, one of his bosses invites him to join this, what seems to be like this secret club, like it's like a members club. And he starts to go there for a few years, and I think it's like on Thursdays, they have this storytelling time. So one member of the group nominates himself to tell a story to the rest of the group, and that's a whole mixture of stories. And there's this one particular story that stays with our main character, so he decides to tell us that story, which is essentially the breathing method. And it's quite a horror story. I'd say it's quite a shocking story. I'm probably not going to say much more about it than that because I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it. But again, it was really, really strong. The characters were strong, the storytelling was strong in that. So I think that, yeah, I'd probably give that one a 4.75. The only reason I probably wouldn't give that one a full 5 is I did feel at the very start of the novella, when the gentleman is beginning to attend the man's club, I say it's the man's club, but it just seems to be populated with men, and I think that's probably because it was written in the early 80s, late 70s, so you probably wouldn't have seen women in these clubs, so it seems to be only populated by men. But yeah, as he was sort of, I felt like we probably had a few too many pages of him just attending this club, and that got a little bit boring for me. But it was only a couple of pages, but generally on the whole I thought the story was really, really good. So I think, Different Seasons is probably one of my favourite story collections that I've read of Stephen King so far. I mean, I haven't read a huge amount. I've read Full Dark, No Stars, and I've read If It Bleeds, and now I've read Different Seasons, and I definitely rate Different Seasons as my favourite. I think it's really accessible for people if they've never actually read any Stephen King before, because a lot of the 3 of the stories are actually adapted into film, so they may have actually seen the film before. But I also think if you're a Stephen King fan, again, like these stories are really exciting in a way because some of them are like tied into other stories in the Stephen King universe. So like The Body is set in Castle Rock, Maine, so we actually see some repeat characters in there. There's a bit of a crossover of characters between The Shawshank Redemption and Apt Pupil, and then Shawshank in itself as a penitentiary is mentioned in the others. I think the only one that I didn't really tie to anything else I'd known before was The Breathing Method, which was the 4th one in there. But I thought it was absolutely banger collection of stories, and actually I think I would rate it overall a 5 because 2 of the stories were 5-star and 2 of them were 4.75. So, you know, unless we're going to like split hairs and say like this is like a 4.84 or something, which I'm not going to do, I'd call this story collection a 5. So that was a really, really nice start to the month with King Family February. So the next book that I decided to pick up and start was The Curator by Owen King. So that's how far through I am, and you would have thought by now, if you've been around for a few videos at the speed I read, that I would have finished this, but I haven't. This was a massive disappointment for me, if I'm honest. I mean, I probably read at a rate of 40 to 50 pages an hour, you know, and I like to sit down for, you know, an hour at a time to have a read. So like after I finish work, I like to sit down for an hour and I like to really get absorbed in my book. And that shouldn't really be a problem unless the book is boring. And this was just such a slow start. I'm not quite halfway through this. I am at 46%, and I've spent about 3 or 4 days on this book, and I would read like 10 pages and then I would just feel like I was drifting off to sleep. And on the first day that this happened, I just thought, maybe I'm tired today, like it's fine. But this happened for the next 3 days that I was trying to read this book. It was like painful in that sense of like trying to read through it. I feel like there's a lot of characters in this book that get introduced, but they don't really seem to go anywhere. And I didn't particularly like any of the characters either. I think that was the problem. What it's essentially about, from what I can tell, is basically we're in the 19th century and there has been a revolution, and there are people who are sort of being the stand-in government while they're waiting for elections to happen, and then there's other people going about their business in this city waiting for something to happen. And I just felt like everybody in this book was waiting for something to happen, and I was waiting for something to happen, not just for them but for me as well, that would sort of give me a sign I wanted to keep reading this. There's this one particular thing which is like a ghost ship in here, and that sounded really interesting, and we had one chapter of that, I think, which was probably about 6 or 7 pages long. Like 50-60 pages have passed. It's never been mentioned again. You know, like it doesn't seem to have had its own chapter. There's been no follow-up on it, and that was literally the only thing that I was interested in. You know, but I say I've read over 200 pages of this. I am now at 213 pages, which is nearly halfway through the book, and I got no idea really what's meant to be happening. I'm still waiting for something to happen. I'm just waiting for a sign really of this book, and I just don't want to continue it at the moment, honestly. Not only did I feel like it was going to put me into a book slump, it was like putting me into a life slump. I felt like I would spend some time reading this and then I'd have all these other things that I would normally get up and do after I've done some reading. And I just felt like, no, I just want to go to sleep. Like it just wore me out, and that is really not a good sign with a book. So what I decided to do was to basically DNF this one for now and carry on to the next book, because I couldn't really, like, it just didn't feel like it was getting any better. So that's a really, really big disappointment. This is the first thing that I've ever picked up from Owen King. And what I would say, his writing style, you know, as in like the way he constructs a sentence and, you know, the way that he describes things is actually really nice. You know, and occasionally I picked up on a little bit of humour in there as well, very occasionally. But I don't know, like the way the characters talk to each other, I'm not like invested. There's a main female character who is sort of going around doing her own thing, but at the same time she's just being bossed around by one man or another. I don't know, maybe she will find her freedom later. I've got no idea, but I just don't care enough. Like, he hasn't made me care enough to want to carry on with that character to find out what happens. The pacing is really off in this book. It needs to be paced a bit faster. I don't even think I could really sort of entirely tell you what genre that I think this is. The mention of a ghost ship indicates that it might be some sort of ghost story, but then again, like, we haven't heard from that for a while. There's mention of different worlds, but we haven't really seen that either. Like, so there's all these concepts that were introduced right in the first chapter. We just haven't seen any of it. It's just, as I said, people walking around waiting for something to happen. So yeah, I'm going to stop ranting about this for now, but essentially I'm going to read it in a DNF status, but I won't officially choose to DNF it until the end of February when we finish King Family February, and I will see if I have found the botheration to pick this up again, you know, after I've read all the other stuff that I want to read in King Family February. But yeah, the chances of me picking it up and carrying on with it are not high. So after that disappointment, I've got to be honest, I meant to be reading, which I was planning for the last week, Sleeping Beauties, which is written by Owen King and Stephen King. So I thought it'd be really nice if I read a novel by Owen King and then I pick up the novel that he wrote with his dad, because I'd have a better idea of who contributed what if I've managed to read something that was independently written by each author before reading the one that they wrote together. But I'm really put off that now. If it's going to be anything like that, I know. Because, as I said, that really risked putting me into a reading slump, and like more than a reading slump, like I said, like an actual life slump. So I am currently not keen on the idea of reading Sleeping Beauties, but I'm going to leave that decision about whether or not I pick that book up for another week. I'm actually really tempted now to leave Sleeping Beauties till another time when I have forgotten how much that other book bored me, and potentially just pick up a Stephen King. You know, I mean, I haven't read The Shining yet, so I might potentially choose to pick that one up instead. I think I'd be more excited to do that because I'm now no longer looking forward to that other book. So we'll see. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read The Curator and what your feelings towards that were, or, you know, have you read Sleeping Beauties? And if you've read The Curator and Sleeping Beauties, did it get better in Sleeping Beauties? Really, just let me know in the comments below. So the next book I picked up for King Family February was one that I have been really excited to pick up, which was Small World by Tabitha King. So this all kind of started off, actually, I knew that Owen and Joe Hill were sons of Stephen King, so that they were authors, but I'd not realised that Tabitha King was also an author who's Stephen King's wife. So I had a look, and she'd actually published 8 fiction books, from what I can tell. And the premise of them actually sounded quite good on some of them. So this was actually her debut novel, Small World, and this was published in 1981. So this is a horror thriller. I really had to go out of my way to get this book. It doesn't really look like her stuff is published new in the mainstream anymore. I did read occasionally certain publishing houses would occasionally do a special edition, like apparently it was one done in 2016 for 1 or 2 of her books, I don't know. But my copy was actually bought, the buyer who sent it to me, because I had to buy it secondhand, I bought it from a buyer in the UK, and they actually messaged me and said that they'd actually bought this in Maine in America like 27 years ago, and they've sort of had it in their collection since then. So that was really nice to think that this has actually come from Tabitha and Steve's hometown, where they seem to write all of their novels about. So this was originally purchased in America, so that $2.95, I'm guessing, is American dollars. It cost me quite a bit more than that, obviously, because this is a bit of an antique. And so because her books are really hard to get hold of, I was sort of really looking at the synopsises on them all to work out, you know, which one do I really think I'd enjoy the most, because they're quite hard to get hold of, and they're not that cheap if you're in the UK trying to get hold of them either. And this is the one that stood out to me. So the premise of this is that essentially we have this villain, Dorothy Hardesty. I think there's like her name's double-barreled, but I can't remember what the double-barreled bit is. But she's basically this, I want to say retired, but I'm not sure that she's ever worked, widow who is a bit older. I think she's probably in her 60s or 70s from what I can tell. And she's one of she's such a big villain. Honestly, you absolutely love to hate her. I mean, she's absolutely awful, this woman is. She's had everything handed to her really on a silver platter, I think, from the moment that she was born. And then her father was the president at some point in her life. And essentially nobody really has ever said no to her. She manipulates all of the people around her to get exactly what she wants. So in the grieving period after her husband has died, we say grieving period because I'm not entirely sure that she actually misses him. But she also lost her son. So she'd lost like two people who were close to her in a short space of time. So her daughter-in-law sort of brought her around to the idea of dolls' houses and collecting dolls' houses. So that's what she did. And when she'd been younger, she'd been gifted a replica of the White House, which is obviously where she used to live. And so she brought that back out of storage and then began to furnish it. And so, she has like this really big obsession with her doll's house, putting everything in her doll's house, and all the people that are sort of in this book are around like the miniature industry and dolls houses and the press and the media like to do with that. So that's like really, really interesting. So this was the first thing that appealed to me, because obviously I used to collect dolls when I was younger and had dolls houses. In fact, I really like Sylvanian families, but it's basically like the same thing. I obviously had Barbies as well. So I was sort of thinking, there's like a ton of ways you can make that creepy, and she really has. So yeah, this went so much better than I thought it would. The pacing was really, really good. So it's not like a page turner, like, oh my God, I've got to get to the next page. But it's just paced in such a way where you're quite happy drinking in the characters and drinking in the situation, and you get to the end of the chapter and you're just thinking, no, I'm going to read another chapter. No, I'm going to read another chapter. Like, that's how it kind of sort of felt. It looks like it's only little, but actually the text is actually quite small in there. I don't know if you could see. So it's just over 300 pages, but I don't think it needed to be any longer. I'm glad it wasn't any shorter. And it was perfect, like really perfect. And I would really love, to try some more of Tabitha King stuff based on this, of what I've read. I had such a good time with it. I was coming towards the end of the book and I actually started to read slower, so that it wouldn't finish. So you really, really like a book like when you do that, and I'm just so shocked that she's not really in mainstream publication anymore, because I feel like I would love for everybody to read this book, especially if you're a horror fan, horror thriller fan. I really think this is up there. The story's like really original, absolutely brilliant, and the way that she's written all of her characters was really, really, really good. So I was not disappointed with this. I'm glad that I went out of my way to get this. I would definitely read this again. It's probably a book that's probably in the worst state of all the books that are in my collection. I mean, looking like it's been dipped in something almost. But that doesn't change how much I love it, because the story in here is absolutely fantastic. So again, let me know in the comments down below if you've read any Tabitha King yourself, especially if you've read Small World. I'm quite interested in her other stories, but I don't think all of them are horrors. I sort of feel like from synopsis that she does like a bit of suspense, a bit of like relationship drama. So I'm sort of looking for the other thrillers at the moment. But I feel like Small World is the only horror. But I need to do some more research into it, as I said, because it's not that easy to get this information for these, because they're not currently in publication. But yeah, super happy about that. So overall, I would give that book a 5-star, which is mental because I've just given different seasons a 5-star, had a do not finish, and now moved on to Tabitha King and had a 5-star. But I'm so happy about that. I was so worried when I picked up this book after reading the Owen King one, thinking, I hope that this hasn't exhausted me so that I'm not going to enjoy this. And it didn't. She had such a way of writing to pull me into the text, so I did the right thing by reading that. So after that, I had like about a day and a half left to reading of the week. And I originally thought I'd be finishing the Owen King book, but I didn't want to do that. And my plan for this week is to pick up King Sorrow by Joe Hill. Now that's a massive tome. That's like over 700 pages, so that's going to take me, most of the week to read. So I wanted like a palate cleanser, because obviously, or maybe say brain cleanser, because obviously the Owen King one was like pretty tiring and hard going. This was really well done and I really, really enjoyed it, but it's still quite an intense thriller, I'd say. So I just wanted to pick something up that was sort of easy to get into. I decided not to pick a Stephen King for this, because most of his novels are really large, to be honest. So that would have taken a few more days. So I've actually picked a non-Stephen King book, which I've just had on my shelf, which has been looking at me. See, this is my excuse for picking up something that's not to do with what I was meant to be doing this month. But I did need a brain cleanser. So House of Monstrous Women by Daphne Farmer is what I've picked up. This is a debut novel by this author that came out in 2025 last year, and it's a gothic horror which is set in the Philippines, and our main character seems to be dabbling with people who are dabbling in witchcraft and like folklore superstition, and there's like a haunted house involved. So I'm already over a third of the way through this book. It's not particularly long, it's about 300 pages. Don't really think it's going to take me too much longer to finish this off and then get started on King Sorrow. But so far I would say that I'm enjoying this. I don't feel that it's on the same level as enjoyment as Tabitha King's Small World. This was just phenomenal. But this is a different type of horror, I suppose. But I am really enjoying the way that the author has written about the scenery, like the setting. I've never been to the Philippines, so I've only ever seen pictures of it online, but the way that they're describing it, and this is Philippines in the 80s as well, so it's not modern day Philippines, it's Philippines in the 80s. And the way that she's sort of describing the location, the setting, is really clear to me, and I feel like I can visualise it all in my head as we're going along, which is really nice. And I think that part of the horror in this is the setting, really, and sort of the anticipation that our main character Josephine has as she's stepping into these new settings or into a different room or whatever. So I feel like that this book could be a bit of an iceberg, but it doesn't seem to be just a simple haunted house because it's got all this folklore around it. And I did read somewhere that cannibalism might have been involved. Now, we haven't got to that as to where I am, but apparently that might turn up later on in the book. So yeah, I'm quite happy with reading this so far. As I say, it's not too intense. It's working as quite a good brain cleanser, and then obviously we'll go into King Sorrow by Joe Hill. Obviously, because that's such a big book, I really wanted to clear my mind, before I get into that, because that's a commitment for like nearly a week, that one, because it's so big. So generally on the whole, I would say that this week has not been too bad reading wise. I did feel like when I was reading The Curator that the reading week had gone on for about 300 years. But in reality, it's only 7 days, in that time, and I've managed to read The Breathing Method, which was a really, really enjoyable story, and finished off different seasons. I've managed to read Small World by Tabitha King, who is new to me author, and I was astounded by her work. I thought it was amazing, and I've managed to pick up House of Monstrous Women, which is, as I've been sat looking at me from the shelf for a couple of months now. And that's a new to me author as well, so I'm going on quite well with that. And if anything, maybe I've just discovered that Owen King is not the author for me, but we'll see. As I say, I'm not going to completely give up on this book until the end of the month. But we'll see, yeah. So let me know how your reading week has gone this week. Are you reading any Stephen King novels yourself, or are you reading any novels currently at the moment that are written by any member of his family? I'd really love to know in the comments down below, so let me know. If you're interested as well, I did speak obviously about the novella Apt Pupil last week because I reviewed it mainly in last week after I'd read it. But last Thursday I did post a video where I do a character analysis of that main character, Todd Bowden, or Bowden, however you want to say it, and compared him to the character Charlie Decker from Rage. So that video came out last Thursday. If you would like to watch that, I've put it into the King Family February watch list, like playlist. So you can just go to my homepage, you can find that and watch that if you'd like. If you've liked this video, please press the like button, and if you'd like to see any of my future content, please subscribe. And I'll see you on Thursday for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye! So I said goodbye, but do you know what I realised? I told you in the intro that there was an Easter egg in this book to Stephen King's universe, and I forgot to tell you what it was. So I have come back to tell you what it is. So our character basically mentions the Overlook Hotel, and the Overlook Hotel is the fictional hotel that Stephen King created, which The Shining is set in, which was published a couple of years before this book. Now, I really wasn't expecting there to be any connection from this book to anything in Stephen King's universe, so I thought that was a really, really nice surprise. It was the only Easter egg that I detected in here. But I'm interested now in her other work as well, if there's any Easter eggs to any of Stephen King's other bits in his universe or any characters or anything like that. So again, if anybody else has found any Stephen King Easter eggs in Tabitha King's books, let me know in the comments down below. See you soon. Bye.